Greetings. Another episode of the Quaggling Sand podcast. It is the 1st of June, 2021. Countdown to summer. Or something like that. It's already summer here in Las Vegas. I think we went over 100 today. Felt like we did it sometime this last week anyway, if not today. And who isn't staying inside? I don't know. The crazy people that are wandering around on the Strip and the Fremont Street, and those are the only two places in Las Vegas. If you happen to catch any of the YouTube streamers, they every once in a while will somehow be convinced to go beyond. I don't know. I mean, there's plenty of interesting stuff to do in Vegas. My favorite is McCarran Airport. Anyway, so doing it easy, or do easy, I guess is the exact version. I'm going to put a link in the show notes newsletter, by the way. If you're listening to this, you should be subscribed to quagglingsand.substack.com. The show notes will appear in there for each show that requires show notes. I've been pondering doing a random or daily short type thing or something, because I spend a lot of time at home. I'm the downside to the pandemic was not a downside for me because I've been home for the duration anyway. I have jokingly said before that I stay home and grow potatoes as though I were on Mars. So I occasionally go out to the grocery store, and I've recently began going to the gym again. But basically, work from home daily. So there's always something going on. Anyway, do it easy. I first saw this video. I'm pretty sure it's either this video or something very similar. Black and white. Kind of looks like a film reel that you would see as part of a newsreel. Back in the, I want to say in the 50s, but somewhere in there. 60s? I don't know. 50s probably. Before my time. But anyway, doing it easy was always how I had it in my head, but DE, do easy. Because, hey, why not? That's fewer words to say to get the point across. And my FFS Talk podcast was about modern collaboration. And if you are one of those lucky few out there who carries around a smartphone, you have more connectivity and computational power than anyone your parents ever knew or thought to know combined, including all of their watches and calculators and wired phones. You know what I mean? Like it so boggles the mind how much connectivity and compute power is in the hands of at least one or two people out there. And yet most collaboration is done. So the modern collaboration was I don't want to get into it again, but collaboration is aimed at working people. Excuse me. Some water there. The collaboration tools are aimed at working people. So do easy. In the video they show, the YouTube video. It wasn't made for YouTube, but it is on YouTube. Simple things. The one that I always remembered the most, or most readily, was the notion of of walking past something like a table, a coffee table or something, and you either have to move it, or sorry, you have to move out of the way of it, or maybe you stubbed your toe. I can't remember. I didn't rewatch the whole video. I'll have to scrub through it. But it was like, don't do that. Do easy. And the person move the table out of the way, and that seems so obvious. But and so yeah, just like I think the quote was something like you just get used to things being difficult, and you just assume that's the way it is. And I've heard that and cringed so many times in my travels about various things. And so one of them, which I covered or I talked about, coverage. Coverage is a word people use too much, and it implies that they're doing some sort of professional news reporting on something, coverage of it. All I did was talk about it by myself until I get guests to join me and discuss these interesting things. So the ability to use first of all, in the video, it's about the simple things, moving the box out of the way, or out from under the sink, or move it under the sink so it's out of the way, or just anything in your day. Like, why do I keep knocking over whatever? Why do I keep in my shower, there's no place to hang, there's no hooks. So like, where do you hang your washcloth, or where do you hang a soap on a rope type thing? I mean, any of those things, there's nothing to hang it on. And for years, that's just one of those things that bothers me. And it occurs to me, that's why I'm doing the entire reason for this episode of Quaggling Sand, is why do I not get a hook I can walk to Lowe's Hardware, or they probably have them at Smith's or CVS or Walgreens or any number of other retail outlets, and I could get hooks and hang them on the shower curtain rod, or stick them somewhere if they're adhesive. It's not even about sparking joy, which, by the way, I did read that book. Conda, is that her name? It's not even about that. It's less about emotion and more about practicality. And I should be more down with that. And that is something I should talk about more often. Do easy. So that prompted me. And so, like I said, so the modern collaboration, the whole episode is aimed at starting this topic of enabling normal people without, it's not their day job to live, and it's not even okay. So sometimes there are tools. Sometimes I would say that aside from email and maybe plain old telephony, right? Like the ability to have a telephone number that someone if any of my grandparents were still alive, they could dial that number and I would answer it. And to them, it's, aside from not dialing Klondike 325 or whatever, the old school numbering scheme, but if anyone who had been brought forward into the 10-digit, area code plus prefix, suffix, right? So I think everybody has gone that way, right? So you as long as you understood how to dial, or how to dial the speed dial number, grandma could reach me. I don't know if she ever did that I remember, but anyway, so grandparents can reach their grandkids. It's pretty straightforward. The phone still works. Messaging, short SMS, classic texting is a throwback to decades ago. That still works mostly, unless Android has a new application that doesn't work with anything. So these old school communication tools are still there. That's kind of the bare minimum. I remember my colleague at BMaC, Mino Talayama, was he and another colleague, our director of engineering, Dennis Teilman, the two of them worked at AT&T on their tablet was it the EO? It was like a gray, it was like an office aimed tablet, definitely. And I just remember Mino saying in his deep booming voice, "Don't F with the phone." That's what we used to tell them. And they F'd with the phone. He didn't say F though. Just like the name of the show has 2 F's and you can say them to yourself. Just in case anybody's listening. So these core communication tools are still in place, but if you look in workplace, and this was like, again, I don't want to retrace these steps too much, but just the tools are there, and then you move to enterprise communications and project, and Jira, just the Atlassian tool set, Jira, Confluence, Bitbucket, or GitHub, or Monday, or let's go email, right? And so today I will go more focused. I didn't really talk about this too much in the other podcast. So if you want to listen to that, I will put a link in the show notes, and you should listen to that anyway. And if you have some cool idea for a topic arc, and especially one that you want to talk about, you should join me and we'll talk about cool things like the economy and technology and assistive technologies for people who need them, which is another project I'm working on, which I'll tell you about in a moment. So, calendar. If you have never used your phone and its built-in calendar application, or calendars, surely if you have an iPhone or an Android device, those are the most common. Excuse me. Those are the most common. So you have in your pocket some network-connected calendar. If someone sends you an email and invites you to a meeting, and they have sent you a calendar invite, so it has an ICS, which I believe is iCalendar Stream. It's a text file, attachment. It is a very terse. It's not JSON or even YAML. It's just a text file. It's like a vCard, if I'm remembering the format correctly. Anyway, it's fairly standard. It's been around forever, and most email clients will, if they're attached to a calendar, right? So Google Mail, Gmail, or Outlook, or what does Apple call their mail? Like privacy mail? Almost privacy mail? I honestly don't, mail, whatever Apple calls it. So when you send somebody an invitation, it is transported via email, and there's an attachment of an ICS calendar invite, and usually there will be a generation of the calendar event display or invite display, which is like location, start time, end time, description, guests, and then you get to say yes, no, maybe, yes, maybe, no, yes, no, maybe, yes, no, maybe. And those are usually links. So when you click on it, it will do the right thing over probably HTTPS. So it'll send back a secure response. If you are using, if you're using a Gmail client, for example, there will, for some odd reason, be an additional yes, no, maybe button set as part of the mail client. And you can say yes, no, maybe there, and somewhere in there it will add to the Google Calendar associated with your account. Although I believe you can also change the calendar if you need to. So anyway, when I'm actually doing it, it's fairly intuitive for me because I've done it many times. And I was saying today to someone who will remain nameless that anyone who, when I worked at Intel recently, several years ago now, people that, anyone who would have said, yeah, I don't really use calendar software, wouldn't have lasted very long because everything there is so calendar centric, and the legacy of the work week numbering scheme. I found it mildly amusing, although it is functional. But it's just one of those things like, WW 32.2, I'll be out of the office. And people will just go, oh, okay. And if you're the uninitiated, you would say, what the hell does that mean? But hey, Outlook numbers the work weeks, and Intel uses those numbers. And then the day of the week. And you don't even know, you don't need to know months or years or anything. You just WW whatever, dot whatever. So the calendar is in your pocket. We already established the fact that at least 2 people on this planet have these smartphones that are always connected. They're probably associated with an account with Google or Apple. You probably have a calendar built in and an email account. So someone can invite you to an event, a meeting, and you can say yes or no. And the time zone will be sort of mostly handled. There's some caveats, but we'll pretend that the time zones just work. So if I'm in Las Vegas and you're listening from New York and I invite you to a meeting at noon, and I include the my time zone, then you will know that it's 3 p.m. where you are. So, right? Piece of cake. And if I need to move it to 11, you'll know that it moved to 2. And anyone who's ever traveled across time zones or had to arrange a meeting across a time zone, just like I just described, these are old hat, right? You're like, okay, I'm gonna leave California at noon, and I'm gonna arrive in California at 8 p.m. But I know that there's a time zone shift, so you'll know that you're arriving at 8 p.m. in New York, but you're arriving at 5 p.m. in California. So if you account for that in your calendar and you need to schedule a phone call for 6 p.m. in California, you'll know, California time zone anyway, you'll know that you will have just arrived, and any delays will make you late, right? So these are all things that your calendar will help you with because it's taking care of time zones and can coordinate across them with different multiple people. It's really great. It's probably one of the most intuitive and yet least used collaboration tools available to, I was just kidding earlier, it's more than 2 people, it's probably like 5 or 6. And all these people have this tool and they don't use it. And that circles right around to the DE. I, more than once, have had discussions, along, phone or email, something along the lines of, what time is it there? Are we on the same times now with daylight savings time? Are we an hour ahead? This is a problem that's been solved. And the more often these take place, the more I become amazed that people are not taking advantage of what is essentially already been identified as DE. Right? Problem already solved. Do easy. Use calendar. Oh, yeah. And so today, on Tuesday, we had a podcast recording for another show, another show entirely, not Quabbling Sound. And we needed to change the day for a guest from Tuesday to Thursday. And why, at the end I said, why are we not adjusting the calendar entry for the scheduled time slot? Because it's just not something people do. And it's amazing to me. So I'm kind of wondering, if you're listening to this and you have thoughts on this, you can certainly, next episode or 2, you can regale me and us, all the people with smartphones that are listening. Regale us with your tales of woe regarding not doing it easy or other people not doing it easy. No, do easy. And if you have a good story, you don't want to talk about it, but you would like to share it with me, you certainly can. Always remember dhugo@quagglingsand.com, or I think you can reply or comment on the show notes if you really want to. And there's a Twitter, Quaggling Sand on Twitter, all the usual places. And that's another do easy counter is, oh, yes, you must use all of the social media. And, oh, you didn't get the same name across all of them. And, oh, you'd like to automate something. And, oh, I applied for a Twitter API access. And I filled out all the fields. What do you want to use this for? Are you going to reshare things? Are you going to use direct messaging? And I said, I basically want to do what IFTTT was doing for myself, probably. I don't imagine releasing this. It's just a, little messing around, acquainting myself with the new Twitter. I actually had an API key from, I think it was 2012, and I wrote a command line thing. I used to, this will make a comeback. I've been hot and cold on this for various reasons. Some of you may know I have been involved more than regular in the mobile vending industry. And back in the day, there was always Twitter. Twitter was the way you would figure out where food trucks were. There's an event. People are cross-tweeting. They're like, hey, it's me and 10 other food trucks. And you somehow fit all their Twitter handles into a tweet. And then when Twitter cards came out, I was like, why not have an event page that you could share that has links to everybody, and you wouldn't have to worry about misspelling or somebody doesn't have a Twitter or whatever. And so I actually had I wrote a little tool, a command line tool, just to try it out. So I would generate a web page with mobile vendor contact information, everybody at an event, and then I would post a link with the Twitter API, share a link to a Twitter card enabled page content. And you could also, back then, you could geotag the tweets in the API. I'm not sure if that's supported anymore. But I said, wouldn't it make sense to tweet, even into the future, if you could tweet the location where you, food truck person, will be parked, if even, approximately. Like if you're at a big venue, I'm gonna tweet with this command line tool. I'm gonna send a tweet with a Twitter card enabled link with all the event information, and it's going to be geotagged with your parked location on the day of the event in the future, and that is where on the other side of a building, on the north end of the park or field. Whatever the venue layout is, there's going to be 50 vendors and we'll be over here. You can't just say, we're going to be there somewhere. Good luck finding us. Right? We have the technology. We have these things in our pockets with accelerometers and GPS receivers and all kinds of craziness. So to me, this is kind of low-hanging fruit, but Twitter makes it hard, and they kept asking me again and again. They sent me several emails. Could you describe how you're going to use the API? And I said, I've already answered this. And they said they got a same form letter response, and I gave up. I'm like, I don't feel excited about this anymore. But do easy is not this. Asking permission to engage people who want to talk to you, who want to hear from you on a platform that you have no control over, and then you ask, can I use a feature that you have? And then they give you the runaround like that. But in general, as I've mentioned before, I think for me personally, even though Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, probably others, although those are the unfortunate big two, those are the unfortunate sort of must-have, the necessary evils. So once you create your content on your blog, or you post a picture on Flickr or SmugMug, or your video on YouTube, I guess is another one. You post your video on Library or Vimeo. Who's going to see it? So you're going to have to tweet it. You're going to have people retweet it. You're going to have followers and likes and retweets and shares. And that seems to me to be another diversion away from do easy. And it hands all your control over to somebody else. And so that's sort of frustrating. And I would very much like to return to the days when I bought my first domain when I was working at Apple. I don't know if I've told this story already, but hey, you're a new listener. Why not? So I moved to the Bay Area in 1993, July of 1993. I was working for BMaC, and I still had my dhugo@hmc.edu email address. I think it was just I don't know if there was like a student subdomain. I can't remember. Anyway, so I had my school address, and I know I had dhugo@jarthur.hmc.edu. That was because I was a consultant in the CS group. So our Ultrix machine, named after a professor, J. Arthur Campbell, I think it was. So, so I was using my school email, and I think that's probably still not uncommon for recent graduates. It was how you signed up for the Facebook initially. You had to have a school email address, which I had. So whenever that was the case, I still had my school email address. But I signed up for Netcom. So I was dhugo@netcom.com. That was way back when. And then Netcom got bought or was doing something weird and was no longer stable or working for me. So I switched to Best, dhugo@best.com, Best Networking. And that worked out for a while. And I want to say that they had I think they had like a server cage in downtown Mountain View that you could go visit or something. That was very weird. But maybe in keeping with my very early and not necessarily completely conscious adoption of DE, I decided at some point I should just register my own domain and then host, wherever the email ends up, a mail server somewhere. I can just point the domain, the beauty of MX records and whatnot. So I was sitting in a small office of R&D4 at Apple, working in the Newton group. We were working on the C++ developer toolkit for the Newton MessagePad 2000. Actually, I think all the message pads, but our target was the MP2000. That was a cool device. Obviously, today it would be considered huge and heavy, and the screen was kind of weird. It was sort of almost like an e-ink screen, but LCD. But and a strong ARM processor. And someday we'll talk about strong ARM, which was cool. That was a cool time. So I was sitting there talking to my friend Jim Krupacki, whom I had known from the days in the Mariani 1 when we worked in Apple Quality. And I said, and I think he had a Netcom. I don't know if he went to Best, but because we would talk about they're screwing up. Where are you going to switch to? Or whatever. So we'd had these conversations, and I said, Jim, I'm going to get a domain. I'm just going to buy a domain from the Internick. And I even had a Nick handle at one point. And I want to say it was DH1426, but I cannot recall. And I think I tried looking it up one time, but I couldn't find it. But either way, I signed up with Network Solutions, and I got my first domain name. And I believe it was $75, and it was, and still is, reallycool.com. And my rationale was I say that all the time. I say things are, oh, that's really cool. That's really cool. And so that was it. Reallycool.com. Could have bought business.com. Could have bought any number of ridiculous investment properties and made millions of dollars. But no, my domain, which I still use today, it is Really Cool Technologies LLC in Nevada. It's an actual LLC. It was Really Cool Consulting in Arizona, also an LLC. And it's just I think it was from March 1996. I've had that domain forever. Jim, by the way, chose Mosphere. Mosphere.com. And if you wanted to send him email, you would send email to jim@mosphere.com. And if you, I'll give you a second to laugh. Yeah. Okay. So that was how I got to where I am today. That's where I have Gmail addresses for everything, hosted domains that point to Google Workspace, which I'm not a huge fan of, but it's super easy to set up. And that just loops back around to DE again. The nice thing about using something like Google Workspace is the Casa Nunzia project I mentioned, maybe implicitly, but Casa Nunzia, we're gonna form a nonprofit charity entity to help coordinate and coordinate collaboration between developers of products and services and the users of those products and services. This is a model called co-creation. I knew about it long before Intel, but the terms, the lexicon of the maker community, makers, hackathons, co-creation, ideation, all these things. So yeah, Casa Nunzia, inspired by Casa Jasmina, which was located in the Turin-based Arduino, or next to the Arduino offices, the Officine. If I'm saying that right, if it's Officine or Officine, I think it's Officine Arduino in Torino, in Italy. And so Casa Jasmina was a hackable apartment. So the idea was and is, what if people that use assistive technologies, people that are vision impaired, hearing impaired, cannot walk or have other ambulatory limitations, and the list goes on, right? The products designed for assisted living, assistive technologies, are more often than they should be designed without actually talking to those people. Like, hey, let's design a really cool thing that will help people, and then when you launch it into the world, the target audience says, oh, that doesn't work. You should have asked us first. And so in my travels before the pandemic times, literally right before, early February 2020, my to that point, most recent discussion in the real world, I've had discussions since, but it was with someone from the VA, like, hey, how can we help a veteran? You have an entire infrastructure for adapted housing, specially adapted housing. Can we be a part of that to connect what you're doing and what you're working with veterans and contractors and whatnot? How do we connect them with people making products? And if you've ever been to CES, you know that the Eureka Park, which is in the Sands Expo in the basement, is probably the most interesting part of the whole show. And part of my presentation is that those are the people that are coming up with the crazy new ideas, right? If you go up onto the big show floor, they're hiring models, to male and female, to to get your attention and to get you to scan your badge and give you a tchotchke of some sort or a pitch, or get you to listen to a salesperson, whatever it is. That it's such a machine and they're turning the crank. But if you go to the Sands Expo, there's so many people that are doing interesting things, and the people in those booths are probably the founders or the people working, it could be everybody. It could be the entire company in a little tiny booth. Not true when you go to the Samsung or Intel or various other booths in the big hall. You're getting, fifth tier salespeople, hired PR people, contractors. I ran into booth contractors there that had worked in the Maker Faire booth in New York. Same guy. Like, oh yeah, it's gone. They flew him out from New York to Vegas. Excuse me. So the whole idea with Casa Nunzia then is to connect all of these, could be people, could be the big companies, but probably a lot of small companies that don't have the access or don't get on the radar. And so part of the VA was like, yeah, that's a huge gap. So when you think about doing it easy or do easy, I keep adding words unnecessarily. Certainly if you, I say if because I'm sort of assuming that you don't, some people have direct and intimate knowledge of this. And so I don't mean to discount you, but the majority of people, especially in the design world, product design, engineering, product development, and it doesn't even have to be assistive technologies, but it could be just anything. Why would someone want to do that? Why would someone need to do that? I've heard that question so many times about just basic things. Why would somebody want to hook up two speakers to their stereo when one will work? Like, well, because it says stereo right on there. So, like, get out of your cubicle, talk to people. You have two ears. You'll hear the stereo effect that you're trying to simulate with the two speakers. So there's often a disconnect, and I found this really good article about the development of the iBot wheelchair, which was developed with good intentions and lots of money, but no good questions asked of future users of the product. And so they designed it's called the iBot, right? And I have an article. It's in the outline. It's from several years ago. And it was very expensive. They developed this big, heavy wheelchair, electric, powered. It could raise up on two wheels, sort of like the Segway guy had that wheelchair that could climb stairs. So it could climb stairs and various. But it turns out that so few people who could benefit from the idea could benefit from the implementation because nobody asked about things. My mouth is getting dry. Nobody asked about things like dimensions, mass. Like, hey, will this thing work? It'd be cool if it did, but no. So that article, I'll stick it in the show notes newsletter as well. So what do we got? Do easy video, show notes, the outline article, show notes. And so Casa Nunzia is going to be this nonprofit organization. And when I speak to people who are doing home remodels for people that need this assisted living technology, products, services, and it doesn't have to be technology even, right? Just a ramp, putting a ramp up to a door, putting a ramp that goes out to the side of the home or to the, whatever. I mean, simple things, railings, handles, grab bars, handlebars, placing appliances at heights and reachable distances. There's a discussion we're having. Doors are this is not my area of expertise, but doors are something like, say, 20, 24. No, that seems narrow. 29 inches, whatever that would be in metric. And there's a desire to make them 34 inches, I think. And it comes down to the width of a wheelchair. And unless you have a narrow wheelchair, or even if you're using a walker, or there are any number of cases where the bare minimum width interior door of a home is not going to cut it, and you end up with scrapes and molding torn off and things getting hooked, right? Like, oh, your wheelchair is stuck, and now you got to back it up. And so it's just these little things, and I can't say nobody, but it is not uncommon enough. No, it is not uncommon enough. Is that right? It should be not that common to have these problems that are oversights. And I have a picture that I include in my presentation. I'll just describe it here. It's a street corner very near where I live, and there's a walk button. The street is high traffic. We're very near the 95 freeway in southern Nevada, like 2 blocks away. So if someone wants to cross this major street, they would push the crosswalk button, push to cross. And there's an ADA compliant ramp, and between that ramp, which is already sloping downward, and that button is corner landscape, so it follows the curve of the corner. There's a small brick, I'll call it a wall, but it's not a wall, but it's kind of a line of bricks following the curve of the corner. And then there are some very large, it's not lava rock, but they're very large sharded rocks. It's not gravel. It's like, even if you are able to walk and balance rather well, it could be a challenge. You could twist your ankle, a rock could give way. So the take home when you look at this picture is, oh, clearly that checked all the boxes, right? They got the ADA compliant ramp, they got the crosswalk button, everything's the right distance and the right heights and whatever. Now let's throw that landscaping in there and call it a day. We're good. All right, see ya. Bye. Work done. Check it off. On to the next public works assignment. Right, so the city of Las Vegas, where this corner is, did what they were supposed to do. Had anyone ever asked a person who is using a cane, a walker, a wheelchair, or who is just generally not sure-footed to try out this corner, they might have said what I have said, which is, hey, this is dangerous. I can't reach that button. That kind of thing. So, yeah. And this, once again, loops all back to the DE concept, which is, for so long, people assume that's just the way it is. It's just the doors are just going to be that narrow, and you're going to have to deal with it with your wheelchair. And as everybody ages in place, as they call it, you too may deal with that. I may deal with that, and we may deal with it sooner than we think. And so the entire goal of Casa Ninja is to make use of co-creation and make the co-creation process with ideation, innovation, and implementation take place on a regular basis. So to foster that idea, to get the word out, to be a point of contact, to be the phone number people would call, as I often say about these things, right? My mom is a kitchen designer. By the way, we have a podcast together, Hugo Floss, if you haven't heard it. She's been podcasting longer than me, so that answers that question you were about to ask. So she's a kitchen designer, and she's trying to come up with a way to not, it doesn't solve the problem, but to basically help with the drying after a roll-in shower, right? So someone using a wheelchair, rolls into a flat shower, takes a shower, and then when they're done, now you have not only yourself to towel off, but there's an entire mechanism. So where do you go to begin? Right. So in this case, ideally, this would be a collection of creative thinkers, and what I would say is like a work group arrangement, multiple work groups, connections to companies and people that are inventing products, and then you'd say, hey, yeah, you should be a part of the design process so that we can learn from what you need and implement it. So that's I didn't really start off this episode thinking of that. I kind of you have been listening to me spitball the relationship between DE and what Casa Nunzia aims to do, and they're closely related in a way. I mean, it's easy to do yourself a DE at home and move that box out of the way, move that table out of the way. If you're going to stub your toe on something, move the thing so you don't stub your toe on it, right? So here it's a question of redesigning the product. And, here's an example of a product that was actually pretty cool, and then it got weird press. And then I guess if you ask around, you will hear that, no, it's not canceled, but Google Glass, on the face of a regularly sighted person, is a gee whiz device. But if you take the camera, you don't really need the display, I suppose. Not the same one either, in either case. But if someone with limited or no vision, so the display for someone with limited vision might be useful as a visual cue, like maybe more of a light, color shifting lights or something for an indicator. But anyway, so it's probably more of an audio interface and the button. And I tested this with Google Goggles, which has since become Google Lens. So I was sitting, I think I was sitting in Paul and Harvey's in Sunnyvale, my local neighborhood bar. And it was not a dark place. They usually had the lights on all the time. So it was more people, just random chatting away, pool tables, the whole nine. So the lighting was sufficient, although I suppose with the flash on a camera, this would work. And I think I had my old Samsung Galaxy 2. So that's dating myself there. And you could point Google Goggles on your phone. So that was like the test bed or the phone-based version of Google Glass eventually. You could point your phone, the camera, at crumpled up American currency, money, and it could identify the bills. And if you are a world traveler, you know that there are very few countries that use currencies that are all the same size for all denominations. It makes wallets a little bit tricky in other countries where they have different sizes and colors for denominations. So they look different. The artwork is different. The colors are different. The sizes are different. In America, they're very similar. Obviously, the presidential portrait, or in the case of the $110 bills, not presidential. But if you have a piece of American currency in your hand, if you look at it, you can see, yes, that's a particular bill. But especially if it's crumpled up and aged, like maybe you could read the imprinted denomination in the corners. Maybe you could tell what the face is, or the back, the reverse. So the obverse and the reverse are possibly discernible to touch for a new bill. But if you have an older bill crumpled up, Google Glass, Google Goggles. I don't know if Lens still does it. I think Lens will try to find related images online. But I remember Goggles very specifically identifying what I was taking a picture of. It would basically say, is this a $5 bill? And it was right. So that's an example. That's a very long road. You're still here. Thanks. That's an example of an end user technology that provides completely usable assistive features, but I guess people are more worried about pirating movies in movie theaters and picture taking in the bathroom. So Google Goggles never really, or Google Glass never caught on. But as far as assistive technologies, I thought it was kind of brilliant. So the question is, hey, people at Google Glass, could you give us a call? So yeah, Casa Ninja, across companies, nonprofit, charity, 501c3 charity. We're just getting started. We're putting together a logo. I got to do websites. I got to do websites for all kinds of stuff. I hate building websites, but they're part of a overarching strategy of connectivity and engagement. Beyond, I'm not talking a WordPress site. I mean, yeah, newsletter, blog, picture sharing, structured data, schema.org. That's the future. I think that's the future of RSS. And yeah, it's more do it easy. Do easy. Sharing podcasts. How does that work? How do you share podcasts with suppose you have a friend who is vision impaired. They can't see. I haven't checked this. I should. And you say, yeah, go check out the Quaggling Sand podcast on Anchor. You could go there and subscribe. And the person says, oh, I use whatever, Google Podcast Player. Is it supported there? And then you say, well, just go to the profile page. And so for engagement challenge, I will offer that to you, listener. Would you be able to subscribe to this show using your player of choice, podcatcher, whatever, using the Anchor website? Is the Anchor profile page they generate accessible, and is it usable by accessible podcast players or text readers for vision impaired? And then obviously there should be a transcript generated for hearing impaired people so that they may participate. And I have found, for example, that when we circle way back to collaboration, some suggestions were made as I was putting some things together to get our first meeting going in 17 days from now in Phoenix. Yeah, we need to use some sort of program management, customer engagement, enterprise planning, enterprise resource planning, whatever. I said, Slack is not going to cut it. I don't want to go down that path. And then what about Trello, or what about some other suggestions? So I checked these out, and I said, if you look up accessibility for these, they aren't, and that's been an open issue for these. And I guess because people who need accessible workflow tools don't work, and so they are ignored. I guess that's how it works. Crazy. I don't believe that, but people making the software probably do. So I'm really sort of paying attention more to how people really use, people on the ground, so to speak, people that are maybe just want to live, don't have a profit motive, right? You're not doing it as part of your work. You're not doing it as part of your business. You just want to listen to an electronic book, an audio book. So you want to listen to an audiobook, or maybe read an electronic book, or maybe you want to find some content, some location data, and you can use the microdata markup defined on schema.org or RDF or JSON. You can provide this data to people for use. And so I discovered while we're putting together a Casa Ninja that this is not always as easy as it sounds, but it should be do easy. So it's story time. It's already been an hour, almost an hour. Jeez. My apologies. Listen to this at 2x. Maybe I'll sound better. Maybe my voice will sound better. I was working at Jawbone. By the way, one of my coworkers there, Travis G, one of the Zircon architects at Google. If you've read about or heard about Fuchsia, congratulations. I'm going to give all the credit to Travis because he almost certainly is deserving of those accolades. Anyway, so yeah, shout out to Travis. So I was hired there after Palm collapsed, despite our best efforts to ship at least one good phone. So Pre and Pixie. So that's 2 of the 6 people out there. Hopefully they're still using their Palm phones. So after the departure, I started working for Jawbone, and I was hired into the QA group. And I will never forget my colleague James on the other side of the cube wall, James Hall. If you ever owned a Jambox and you used their live audio or something, the stereo, it's called crosstalk cancellation. So it makes the audio sound like it's fully spatial, 3D spatial audio. So he didn't invent that, but he implemented all the algorithms. And so we were sitting. I was sitting in my cubicle getting all this sound that would have like weird sound fields, so he could try out. He was testing his code in the DSP. So anyway, so I was hired into QA, and one time James said, "How come you're in QA? Because he had some Z transforms on his whiteboard." I said, "Oh, Z transforms. Is that a delay?" And he's like, "Whoa, wait. If you know DSP, why are you doing QA?" And I said, "Well, first of all, I'm not a DSP engineer, and second, I don't really do QA either. So I reported to the QA person, but I pretty much did whatever I wanted because I said, hey, step 1, the way that you interact with these headset devices is ridiculous. So I wrote this Python code that would pull all of the data off the device, and you could parse it, and you'd get the calibration curve out of it and some other useful tidbits, and you could set registers and everything. So I just wrote this command line tool to do all this because I noticed one of the lab tech, well, the only real lab tech, Cam Murphy. I haven't heard from Cam forever. I hope he's still around. He would use some WinHex tool or something, and it was very cumbersome and it took forever. So it would take minutes to kind of tear down a device digitally, right? Pull all the data off, figure out what's going on, try to assess a failure, right? Failure analysis. So we turn that into seconds, right? Like, yeah, just run this tool. Got all your data, generate a graph for you using like Matplotlib. I was a fan of Matplotlib. So at some point they said, hey, we need to deploy our production line in Mexico, because right now it's at Foxlink in somewhere in Guangdong, probably near Shenzhen, but I'm not exactly sure where, in China. But they wanted to have an alternate production site. So they said, just understand our quality control process and all that. So in my travels, I did a couple things. They were doing seat licenses of MATLAB. I was going to say MathCAD, but that's different. MATLAB from MathWorks. And it would calibrate the devices and then do some testing on some different pieces of hardware. And Cam was basically the designer of the hardware, so I would work with him on like, oh, here's how these devices work, and here's how production line use of these devices can introduce error. And so I rewrote everything, and I just adapted everything using SciPy, NumPy, Matplotlib, and I was able to reproduce everything so that we were getting identical results doing calibration and testing, right? QC testing. So this was end-of-the-line testing, right? So something like 22 production steps, and then you'd get to the calibration step when the unit with the Bluetooth headset was fully assembled. Then you do there was the audio test, the speaker test, right? And then the microphone test. So different sweeps and frequency response curves and sensitivity, all the the usual audio testing in this mount that was in a soundproof, not really a soundproof box, but it was supposed to be soundproofing. And so along the way, I was talking to our production guys in Shenzhen. I would literally sit at the place I mentioned earlier, Paul and Harvey's, on my BlackBerry. Because at that point, I dove headfirst into BlackBerry, which was funny at Palm, because that's another story for another time. Anyway, so I would chat with these guys all the time. I was friendly with them, and they were our employees on site at Foxlink, which is totally common there. I never went to China when I was there. Now, in hindsight, I wish I did, but I got there eventually. And so they would send me spreadsheet dumps of all of the production line data. We had 3 production lines running. So and then all the devices were identified by their Bluetooth ID. And I would get these data dumps, and we could see which production line of the 3 was doing what their total output was, what the failure rate was on the calibration, how many times they recalibrated the same device, what it did on the so calibration, then test, audio test. So we could see what was happening on the production line with these the data reports, right? So at some point, and so I sort of took ownership of it, because nobody was doing this. Nobody was checking this data. Nobody was even looking. And at one point, I remember I said, what is the work schedule like? And they said, oh, we have 6, what was it? We have 6 days a week, 2 10-hour production shifts. Yeah, think about that for a second. So I said, oh, so I'm getting timestamps data for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, nonstop. And they said, huh, that's weird. I'll let you fill in what was probably happening. But anyway, so because we were only seeing the data on the production line, we didn't have a device in hand to check that against. Does that make the dots connect a little bit easier? So I made this 3-dimensional graph that I could spin, and it was the production lines, the time of day for each data point, so a timestamp, and then failure modes. So what kinds of failures we were seeing in what kinds of shifts, and time of day. So which shift, which production line, and then which failure. So there were some shapes and colors for the for the markers, and the 3D graph for the production lines and times of day. So there's a lot of data, but it became very clear when certain problems were arising, and production line 3 had problems in certain shifts. And at some point I will tell the story of which happened before this while at Palm, about how we debugged a shipping problem, the way the shipping containers and the packaged phones were oriented on the shipping container, how we tracked down when exactly this problem was happening, thanks to our understanding of the production line and all that. So this was sort of along the same lines. And that was actually something I worked through with Travis specifically. So that's how I know Travis is a brilliant dude. But we knew that already. So yeah, it turns out the production line number 3 was not physically next to the other 2. It was in the same building, but like across the work area in this this big warehouse style layout. And so production line 3 was located in like a back corner in relation to the other 2. And it turns out there was some sort of like a ceiling fan or an air conditioning unit or something that was reasonably close to production line 3 physically, up on the ceiling. But I believe what ended up happening was it was throwing enough. It wasn't the noise, the audible noise. It was throwing enough inductive load noise on the power supplies for the test components along the production line that it was throwing off data. So it was throwing off, I think we used an M Audio USB sound card that was attached to these ridiculously expensive hats, head and torso. I can't remember what the S stands for. The fake blue torso thing that they have, thousands of dollars worth of audio equipment in the head to simulate the response, the head transfer function. And so that device was, because of where it was electrically, not even physically, but electrically, in relation to the calibration and testing hardware, seemed to be introducing errors that we were able to counter, right? You just put some filtering. So it wasn't the audio. And then here's another fun one before we wrap this up, because I'm already boring you to tears. Bonus. I mentioned that the test, after calibration, you go into this test jig. You'd clamp the headset down, and it would push the speaker of the headset into the hat's microphone. So that would be one of the ears of the, what do you call it, of the torso. And then the microphone would be oriented. There were two microphones that would be perpendicular, like they would be oriented perpendicular to the point source of the sound field from a hat's speaker, right? Again, very, very expensive. And these are designed to have a very, very predictable response, so we could have a predictable test, right? So the whole jig with the clamp, the speaker, the microphone, was on a platform that I'm going to say was bigger than a letter size piece of paper, or A4, bigger than A4 paper. Not much, but bigger. And it was inside this. It was actually an anti-static, like it was a Faraday cage of sorts. So you would close this top. It would normally have like a hydraulic assist, because it was supposed to be very heavy with the shielding, but because they took the shielding out and made it into a sort of a faux soundproof box, and it was sound reducing, noise reducing. It wasn't soundproof. And by the way, I've been in a soundproof chamber, and that's it's easy to get dizzy in there. So what I found, we had these calibration curves, which were very predictable, and then we'd have these test curves from the testing that took place right after in this unit I've just described. And we were getting all kinds of different data and whatnot, and in that spinning graph I mentioned. So we had one of these chambers, one of these little soundproofing attempted test box things, and we had the jig on the platform. So I spent, I don't know, maybe an hour. So I took the platform and I moved it around inside the chamber, right? Because there was enough room for it to be in 6 unique positions, not even accounting for between those positions, right? So I moved it to all the way in the back left, all the way in the back right, center, front, right? So I took 6 different measurements multiple times, and then we had a meeting at some point. And I said, hey, I can design any outcome I want from this. I can give you a product that sort of works, that works perfectly, that is a little weird, based on where it was positioned in this box. And it was hilarious. Somebody who had been there at the shop on the production floor said, it depends on how tall the person is, because if the person is shorter, they pull the jig closer to them so they can reach it, and then some people push it back because they're tall. So it was ridiculous, because they're, for comfort, because nobody ever bothered to measure this, they were actually getting drastically weird, bizarre, but yet correlated results on production based on this, right? So that was very educational. Another facet to the jewel that is my 30-ish years of random engineering experience. So on that note, it's been, an hour and 10 minutes already. Like I said, 2x. You'll get through this and it'll probably still feel like an hour. But anyway, I will remind you again, quagglingsand.substack.com. I also have a weekend, Quaggling Sand weekend. So if by chance I start to do some interstitial episodes, I don't know if I'll do show notes for all of them. So they might just be whatever. Depends on how much time that takes up. I'm not a fan of Anchor. You cannot automatically publish. There's no API. So you could obviously post data directly, but it's frustrating. I'm not a huge fan. I'm not a huge fan of relying on RSS. That's another podcast for another day, another episode. But anyway, so there's at least one episode of Quaggling Sand a week that has a show notes newsletter, quagglingsand.substack.com. There's a Twitter for Quaggling Sand. There is a weekend newsletter from Revue, Revue, which is a Twitter property. So that one, the URL is not, they don't do a subdomain custom name. So it's something like getreview.co/profile/quagglingsand, I think. But there's a link to that in the other, in the show note newsletter. So I cross-link them, and then that one also gets tweeted. So I try to tweet out both. That one gets tweeted automatically. This show notes newsletter gets tweeted when I do that, because remember, I tried to get a Twitter API key. And I got thwarted. So for the moment, some manual processing going on. But hopefully you're finding these shows interesting and finding them at all. And if you can share them, that would be fun. And I have my Buy Me a Coffee profile, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo, with various links to various things, and there will be more links to more things. And so if nothing else, that is sort of the home base of links. I'll have my personal blog someday. I don't really Instagram so much anymore, but I certainly have photos that will make their way into some sort of display. I actually kind of like a Tumblr style, although Tumblr itself is sort of a little off. But the Tumblr format, and then combining Tumblr and a newsletter for assembling pieces of a newsletter. But that's for another time. So that's one of the reasons I'm exploring newsletters right now. So anyway, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo if you'd like to at least get the top view of projects and links. There will be more. You are not obligated, but certainly welcome to buy me a coffee. If you do so, that will be the money. Any monies will be applied to coffee beans. I have many right now, but who doesn't need more coffee? If you are interested in our other shows, those are also linked there. They're presently on Anchor, although they really need to have their own hosted RSS feed, like a primary, like DNS, right? I need a primary and a secondary. So Anchor is a good secondary. And that is where I will leave it today. Again, thank you. Tell your friends, like, share, subscribe, reshare, re-like, resubscribe, all those things. Thank you so much. Good day.